In the interest of time, thank you very much. I want to tell you I am very happy to see such an active audience after all this time. I wanted to tell you something that for years, my job has been to identify and find terrorists. Think of that. I see no terrorists here. None. I have been looking closely. Actually, my colleagues tell me there are no terrorists in Camp Ashraf. My colleagues and friends, the FBI, the military, have all said time and again, we are finding no terrorists. Actually, there are terrorists on my lists. They are the current leadership of Iran. National security is a responsibility for me, for the United States and its citizens, and of course world peace is our desire. Our nightmare is nukes in the hands of terrorists. That's the worst scenario we can come up with. And if you take a look at that scenario, there's only one or two places on the earth, in the globe today, that qualify. That is why we are so concerned about getting to a conclusion soon in Iran, because all of this time that has gone by since we first began to understand their nuclear intent and their capability to getting nuclear capability has been many, many years. And that turns out to have been wasted time, and they are having success. So that policy has not worked very well. When I go back and take a look at where we are in the United States today, we are technically a nation at war. When I speak to audiences in the United States, I always ask a question. Do you think we are a nation at war? And you would be surprised how many people do not think that we are a nation at war. This is a different kind of war. We weren't sure about that in 1993 in the trade towers. We're more sure about it now at 2001 after the trade towers. But our problem is after 10 years, think of that, 10 years since 9/11, our commitment is understandably in the United States dwindling. If you ask the question about how committed we are to fighting the war today, we're still having arguments about how to deal with the terrorists and whether to deal with the terrorists. We actually have some candidates now on the hustings in the United States suggesting we should totally disengage and come back inside Fortress America. Wildly impractical, but that debate is on and out there. We just haven't gotten off to a very good start so far in this millennium. I see a spiral downwards toward violence, towards instability in too many places in the globe. It's hard for me to think of a lot of places today that were better off today than they were maybe 12 years ago. So I think we've got a lot of things to consider as the world superpower. Now, I say I am an American proudly. We are people who are sincerely committed, compassionately committed to the right values of freedom and democracy, and we are willing to share those values and to help others who want those values in ways that we are able to do that. That's who Americans really are. We'd like to be liked, but we'd rather be respected. These are things that, as we go about our business in the global world today, that are on our mind. So it is very hard for us to understand why our friends, as Mr. Bonnet, the director, said at the beginning, are puzzled that we aren't doing something, because we too are puzzled. Why are we not doing the things that we know we should be doing, honoring the things we cherish on a global basis with people who are confronted with problems? I think that the answer probably comes down to a statement I want to read, because I think it's a brilliant one, in a book called Monsoon, recently out by Robert Kaplan. And he said, do we as Americans fully believe in what we say we stand for? And if we do, we need to act. And so I am going to address your question. What does it take to get America engaged? First of all, it takes leadership. I'm going to talk a little bit about things that trigger American action, and then talk a little bit, very briefly, about regime change. Regime change is a very interesting subject. I think that the answer to your question will come in regime change. But what I'm trying to convey to you, there are a lot of reasons, a lot of challenges that come across our desk as the great superpower, and we are very inconsistent about how we respond to them. And it is puzzling to our allies, and it is comforting to our enemies, because enemies profit on uncertainty and on weakness, and we do know that. So we have to come to now the question of a possible solution to where we are with our leadership. And this brings me to the subject of regime change. I think Secretary of State Clinton listens surely to at least two. One would be the President of the United States, and the other would be the people of the United States. And sometimes it is important to make the distinction that the American people and the American administration are not always an entirely tight synchronization. And I believe that is the situation that we have now, and we will continue to have on this subject. The questions then about what President Obama is going to do about this, I think, will be a debate issue. I think it's a certainty. The Republican strength is national security and dealing with these problems. Once we get through the Republican primary, I am relatively certain that this issue will become a front and center issue, because it symbolizes all of the values that we want to address in this election on national security and human rights. So I think it's a certainty we're going to get there. The final point I want to make is another quote from a friend that I think many of you in this room know, named John Bolton. And he is quoted in an editorial in the USA earlier this week, talking about this situation in Iran and whether they will nuclearize. In his words, and I quoted, "The most likely outcome is stark. The world's central banker of terrorism will very soon become a nuclear weapons state. Obama's irresolution and inaction could well make a nuclear Iran his most lasting legacy." Legacy is a huge word politically. I think there is incredible leverage in the statement that Ambassador Bolton made, and I do think you will see that leverage applied during the election season. The four things we have to do immediately, obviously, are ensure that the participating parties protect life, provide for quality of life, and make sure we have a just refugee status for Camp Ashraf. No doubt about that. That's day one. But the second thing we need to do, agree. The Department of State, I have asked twice in my career from an official position, what's the deal? Why are these people on the list? The first answer was a number of years ago, and I was told that there were negotiations going on, diplomatic negotiations. That was many years ago. That may have been true. I've asked more recently, publicly, and I've been told that the answer is we're working on it. Well, we've run out of time, and I think we are right to demand a justification from our Department of State of why the listing is there. And if there is no justification, very clearly there seems to be none. Nobody has come up with any. The courts have said there's none. The observers have said there's none. You come to the conclusion they're not going to be able to do anything except delist. And I think sooner the better on that. And finally, as we talk about our government and regime change, I would certainly like to have as much attention possible on those who represent pro-democratic, pro-freedom, legitimate solutions to the problems. And that, of course, would be you and your organizations and the work you're doing. There's an old saying in Washington, if you can't solve the problem, get out of the way before you get to be a part of the problem. And I assure you, the American people are not going to let the United States of America become a part of the problem. We will be part of the solution. Thank you.